Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to HLA webinars. I am Carla Byers-Smolin. I am the Chapter Membership Coordinator for HLAA and your host today. Today's presentation is FCC Accessibility Updates for people with hearing loss. We are delighted to have a guest panel of speakers from the FCC's Disability Rights Office today. I need to give you some tech tips to get started. To see captions on this webinar, you only need to look at your screen. Captions on the webinar are on the purple bar of the presentation. You do not need to enable subtitles on your Zoom meeting screen. We have two interpreters today. Gerard Williams will be providing voice interpretation, and Amy Cressap will be providing voice interpretation. You should be able to see the interpreters and the panelists in gallery view. We recommend that you open your chat box and move it away from the captions so that the chats do not interfere with the captions. Sorry. We ask that you use the chat box only for technical issues and for comments. We would like the participants to use the Q&A option on the video for asking questions. Okay. Your screen should be in side-by-side mode. And you should be able to see the panelists on the one side, on the right side, and the slide presentation on the left. And you can adjust the size of your side-by-side view by going to the gray bar on the middle between the two screens to adjust your view to see the panelists more or the slides more. If you join by mobile or phone device, your view may be different, and you may have to swipe the screen to your desired mode. This is what your screen should look like, hopefully, with the slides and the gallery there. Okay. Now that we've covered tech tips, I'm going to turn this over to Lisa Hamlin, who is HLA's Public Policy Director. She will now introduce the guest panel. Lisa, go ahead.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I noticed that some people have not found the interpreters. If you go to your screen and you hover over the bottom of where you see everybody's picture, you'll see a little arrow. Go to the next one and you'll see the interpreter is on that slide. Okay, and we will have other people answering in the chat box if there are other technical problems you have. So look at that chat box for that, okay? Now, I want to welcome you all for being here. We're thrilled that so many people have come to listen to our webinar today and watch what's going on with the FCC accessibility updates for people with hearing loss. Now, the Federal Communications Commission regulates interstate and international communications by radio, television, wire, satellite, and cable in all 50 states and the District of Columbia and US territories. So today we have staff from the FCC who will talk about several issues important to people with hearing loss. Access to captioning on television, hearing aid compatible phones, and emergency information are all vital to people with hearing loss. HLAA does work with the FCC, and we serve on the FCC's Disability Advisory Committee to ensure that you have a voice at the FCC. But you know, you can do that too. Today you'll hear not only what the FCC has been working on, but you can also learn how to reach out to the FCC and have your questions or your comments answered, and even your complaints. So today, it's my pleasure to introduce to you, first of all, Diane Burstein, who is the Deputy Bureau Chief of the Commission's Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. As Deputy Bureau Chief, Ms. Burstein helps to oversee the FCC's accessibility policies and programs. We also have Suzy Rosen Singleton, a native user of American Sign Language, who is the Chief of the Disability Rights Office of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. She oversees rulemaking proceedings and stakeholder activities to ensure accessible emergency communications, modern communications technology, and video programming for millions of individuals with disabilities. And we have Eliot Greenwald, who is a Deputy Chief of the FCC's Disability Rights Office. He participates in proceedings involving telecommunications relay services, television closed captioning, real-time text, and implementation of the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act of 2010, which includes advanced communication services, video description, TV, user interfaces, internet captioning, emergency information, 911 calling, hearing aid compatibility, and the National Deaf Blind Equipment Distribution Program. As you can see, these are all hardworking people working for you. So it is my pleasure, and join me in welcoming the panel today. And I'm going to turn it right over to the panel so we can get right down to what they'd like to tell us.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for that. And thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to speak here today about the important work that the Federal Communications Commission's Disability Rights Office performs to help ensure access to communications by people with disabilities. DRO is made up of dedicated and hardworking professionals who tackle a wide variety of disability-related matters to advance the FCC's goals of increasing accessibility of communications, services, and technologies for people with disabilities. As Lisa suggested, and as the introductions show, DRO has a very broad portfolio, which loosely can be divided into three broad areas. The first is video programming. The second, emergency communications. And the third, modern communications. We'll drill down on some of the specific issues later in the panel, but for now, I just wanted to give you a sense of what falls within some of these categories. Under video programming, DRO handles issues related to both the programming and the equipment used to access that programming. We develop rules ensuring closed captioning of video programming and audio description, and access to captioning and audio description on TV sets, set-top boxes, and other equipment. Under the broad category of emergency information, DRO also regulates in the areas of accessible emergency information on television, access to 911, accessibility of emergency alerts, both on TV and on wireless devices. Modern communications is a kind of a catch-all category that encompasses a lot of different areas where DRO continues to modify its rules to ensure that it keeps up with the different changing areas of technology. These include things like closed captioning on streaming media, accessible text messaging and emails, and accessible equipment such as computers, tablets, mobile phones. We also deal with issues related to hearing aid compatibility. And we oversee the important functions of the telecommunications relay service, which provides services such as internet protocol caption telephone service, IP relay, and video relay services. Finally, we also administer the National Deafblind Equipment Distribution Program, which distributes equipment throughout the country to low-income people who are deafblind. DRO covers lots of areas, offering expert advice within the FCC to other bureaus of the FCC and helping to develop rules and policies. Another important function that we serve is to deal with the public and to receive and resolve complaints about accessibility and to communicate with the public about our rules and policies. Thanks for the chance to briefly describe and explain what DRO does, and I'll turn it over to Suzy to address this in more detail. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are very happy to be here with you all today to talk about, if we could go to the next slide, please. As you heard from Diane, we have three substantive areas that we oversee and regulate. And in doing that, we think it's very important to explain that we do it with engagement, with your feedback. So what I want to emphasize first is how we engage with you. And then after that, we'll go into more detail about the substance that Diane just talked about, those three major areas of focus. But first, we're going to talk about stakeholder engagement at DRO. First on this list is the Disability Advisory Committee, which is a federal advisory committee established in 2014. And we have had HLAA as a very valuable contributor to that committee ever since its inception. It has given us many recommendations. We have another slide that includes a picture of all the DAC members for this current term, but we'll be talking about that more in a minute. The next bullet point, the chairman's AAA. We recognize every year outstanding products and services that have helped to promote innovation in accessibility. And this year, because of the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act and the 10th year of the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, we have encouraged that nominations be of individuals rather than products. Individuals who have contributed to the advancement of accessibility to communications technology and services in the fields of policy, advocacy, research, and design. The nominations are due by September 4th, so please do submit nominations if there are individuals you think who would be deserving of this recognition. And we will recognize those winners at an event in October. For more information about the nominations process, please visit www.fcc.gov/chairmansAAA. And we will be sharing quite a few URLs with you today, but all you need to really remember is one, which is the Disability Rights Office homepage, because that homepage has everything listed there, all of the links and so forth, including the Chairman's AAA. That's fcc.gov/accessibility. And I believe that this PowerPoint will be made available to you after the event as well, so you can certainly refer to that to get that information too. Next on the list for some of our engagement initiatives, we have the American Sign Language Video Library for those of you who do use ASL. And would rather get information in your native language. So we have tried to be very broad, including a variety of different topics in short video format, whether it be about broadband, captioning, relay service, or so forth, emergency information, to explain what our rules require and how you can take action. The next one is Access Info Listserv. We maintain and operate a listserv to let subscribers know when we have new rulemakings or activities or events that have to do with disability issues. And that is something that is sent out. In order to subscribe to that, simply send an email to accessinfo@fcc.gov, and we'd be happy to add you to our subscriber list. We host roundtables and forums, outreach. This, for example, I see that we're approaching 300 participants today, and that is where we really feel that we're engaging best because it helps inform our work to identify issues that we may need to address. For roundtables, one example in May of 2019, we had Lisa Hamlin as a panelist to talk about issues surrounding live programming like news. Some of you may have experienced a lack of captioning for impromptu news segments like breaking news or field reports or what have you. And that's where we were all trying to take a look at how we can try to address the accessibility issues and balance them with the needs of those very small stations who may not be able to afford 24/7 captioners. And the next bullet is social media. The FCC has tried to have a presence on social media, both Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and so forth. And we would certainly welcome your input about how we can continue to engage with you. We also have a flagship program, our ASL consumer support line. If you would prefer to call us and call us over a video phone rather than using a third-party relay service, we certainly do welcome those of you who use sign language to do that. If you use ASL, the phone number is 844-432-2275. And just a few more things. The consumer and small business guides. We promulgate a lot of that content. So when you are looking at the text format, if you're interested in looking at some of our information, websites are going to have lots of different guides available for your convenience and benefit. Someone asked for that phone number again. It's 844-432-2275. And please know that that number is also included on the last side of the presentation for resources, so you'll be able to see it on screen as well. Last but not least, the Accessibility Clearinghouse. We have a database that is required by the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, CVAA, to have a database available on our website. So we have implemented a database with access to lots of different links, information about resources like hearing aid compatibility, wireless handset status reports, Global Accessibility Reporting Initiative, the GARI database, and CTIA's accesswireless.org database as well. So we tried to centralize some of that information for your use for those of you who are looking for accessible phones or devices that have to do with your hearing loss. You should be able to get that information there. And while it's not on the slide, I do also want to emphasize another important effort to engage is our complaints system. And we'll be talking about that in more detail later as well. But that is so crucial that we do need to hear from you if you feel like you have some concerns that are not otherwise being addressed, that we are here for you if it is, of course, under our jurisdiction. Next slide, please. So now this slide shows the image of the current Disability Advisory Committee. This is the third term. And the next and last meeting of this term is on October 14th. We will be announcing the roster for the fourth term in a few months before the next term begins, December 2020. For the next 2-year term. So I want to thank HLAA again. You can see Lisa there in the front row for all the value that she has contributed in providing information and helping us with our rulemaking proceedings. So thank you so much for that, Lisa. And thank you to all of your members who, participate in different ways as well. Now I'm going to turn it over to talk about some of the substantive parts of this. Diane is going to start us out by talking about video programming, which is one of our 3 areas. So next slide, and I will turn it to Diane.
Thank you very much, Suzy. FCC rules for television ensure that viewers who are deaf and hard of hearing have full access to video programming. As a general rule, all new full-length programming aired on television or cable or direct broadcast satellite must be captioned. But of course, there are exceptions for some older programs that never were captioned, or programming aired in the middle of the night, TV ads, and some hyper-local programming, like programming you might have on public access channels. And if that full-length program was shown on TV with captions, the captions must follow that show if it's streamed online. So there now is captioning on the internet of programs, let's say if it aired on a cable program network and then it was picked up by Netflix. If it had been captioned on that cable program networks, then it also would be aired with captions online. And if clips of that television program that was captioned are posted by that network on its website, for example, or an app that it provides, it also must be captioned, subject to some exceptions and different considerations depending on whether the clip is of live programming or pre-recorded programming. But in general, there now is so much more captioning than there had been previously due to the CVAA and various FCC rules implementing those requirements. The FCC also has quality standards for captions. The rules require that captions should be accurate, in other words, match the spoken words and convey background noises, or other sounds. They should be synchronous, in other words, coincide with the spoken word and displayed on the screen at a speed that can be readable. They should be complete, running from the beginning of the program to the end to the fullest extent possible, and properly placed so that they do not block other important information on the screen. In addition to the video programming itself, FCC rules cover the display of captioning on equipment. They require that the equipment allow customization of the captions, such as changing the size, font, and color of the captions. We also have rules that govern television sets, set-top box controls for obtaining accessible programming, and menus and program guides. TV sets and set-top boxes and similar equipment must have a button, key, or icon to access captions. And another area that we regulate is audio description that is provided on a secondary audio track for people who are blind or visually impaired, where it fills in some of the places in a program where there is no audio. Under the rules, 87.5 hours of video programming per calendar quarter must be provided with audio description on programming provided by the top 4 broadcast networks, that is ABC, NBC, CBS, or Fox, in the top 60 television markets, as well as on the top 5 cable networks, or non-broadcast networks rather, that are carried by multi-channel video programming distributors like cable systems or DBS. And those top 5 networks are currently Discovery, Home and Garden TV, History, TBS, and USA. So that's kind of a very brief overview of the many rules that we have in this area. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Suzy, who is going to talk about some other areas of substance that we deal with in the modern communications area.
Thank you, Diane. Next slide, please. This is Suzy speaking. Next slide, please. Thank you. And before I start here, I want to let everybody know I see a lot of questions about captioning, and we're going to try to answer as many questions as we can after we get through our presentation piece. So thank you so much for sending those questions in, and keep them up. Please do know that we are also happy to try to answer your questions afterwards if we're not able to get to them during the session. Now, we're picking just a few highlights of modern communications. There are really 3 areas here. There's CVAA biennial report, HAC, hearing aid compatibility, and relay services. And that's our next slide. But for right now, first, I wanted to expand a little bit about our CVAA biennial report as required by the CVAA, that we provide a report to Congress every 2 years. Our next one is due this October 8th, 2020, and we want to thank HLAA for their input on that as well. The report must include an assessment of 4 things. The level of compliance with CVAA's accessibility obligations under 3 sections of the Communications Act. The first is Section 255. Which is telecommunications equipment or consumer premises equipment. The second section is 716, advanced communication services. And the third section is section 718, which is IP browsers built into phones need to be accessible to people who are blind or visually impaired. So that is our first aspect here. And the second is the extent to which barriers still exist with respect to new communications technology. Third aspect of that report is the impact of the CVAA's requirements on the development and deployment of new communications technologies. Fourth and last is the number and nature and process and resolution of related complaints. So those are the 4 things that we will be expounding upon. It's actually great timing because it's the 10th anniversary of the CVAA, so we're looking forward to celebrating that with that release of the report as well. The second major area that I wanted to emphasize for you, which is HAC, hearing aid compatibility. And first, I want to share just what the general requirements are for specifically wireless phones, as some people have been asking in chat or in the Q&A, how would you make hearing aids more compatible and what have you. We regulate the phone side of that equation, the phone equipment, rather than the hearing aids. So the FDA regulates the actual hearing aid devices as well. There's a split in the jurisdiction of that work on hearing aid compatibility, but we focus specifically on the phones and require that manufacturers who offer 6 or more wireless handsets, at least 66% of those must be compliant with HAC requirements. That was starting October 4th of 2021. That will be increasing to 85% a requirement. For service providers that offer 6 or more wireless handsets, by April 3rd of 2019, which is in the past year, 66% of wireless handsets models that are offered nationwide must be compliant with HAC requirements. And then that will go up to 85% April 4th of 2022. The requirements for the 5 or less handsets that are offered by a manufacturer or service provider are more limited. Certainly not as broad as what you were talking about, a larger number of manufacturers and providers that most offer more than the requirement here. Fairly soon we're going to be moving up to 85%. And some of you may be wondering, where is the 100%? In 2016, we released a report that established a task force to look at 100% HAC compliance. That is being led by the Alliance for Telecommunications Industry Solutions, ATIS or ATIS. And there are 6 participants on that task force: CCA, the Competitive Carriers Association, CTIA, HLAA, NAD, TDI, the Telecommunications for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, and last is TIA, the Telecommunications Industry Association, TIA. So this task force was tasked to analyze data and assess current technological issues and market conditions specifically for wireless handsets, to develop recommendations and submit them to the FCC by December 31st of 2022 about the viability of mandating a 100% HAC compliance rule. The task force, their recommendation could serve as the basis for future FCC rulemaking because the Commission had said back in 2016 that the Commission would decide by 2024 whether or not to require 100% compatibility for hearing aids with equipment handsets. A few other things have happened recently. We released in January a notice of proposed rulemaking to adopt a new HAC wireless technical standard that ANSI established in 2019. Currently, the requirement is for 2011 standards, and we wanted to update our rules to document that standard. We also wanted to update the labeling requirements for HAC device packaging to ensure that people can understand what standards apply to that hearing aid compatible equipment, whether this is a 2011 or 2019 standard. So we collected comments from you, and thank you to HLAA for being a very active actor in that proceeding. So we will hope to release an order sometime soon, and if you subscribe to Access Info, you'll certainly be able to get notified that that order is available as soon as it's released. Next, in March 2018, we updated our voice control standards for wireline handsets devices, and we also updated for wireless handsets volume control equipment. For many of you who have found that it's hard to get information about whether or not a phone is hearing aid compatible, we have implemented a new website requirement since November of 2018, which requires providers to post that information on their websites for your convenience. Prior to that, they simply filed reports to the FCC. So that's what makes this a little bit more transparent. I do also want to let you know publicly that we're get little to no complaints about HAC issues. So if you truly do have concerns about that issue, we hear through the grapevine that those concerns exist, but we're not getting the complaints data. So please do reach out and let us know if you have concerns and complaints about hearing aid compatibility. Now I'm going to turn it over to Eliot for the next slide, which focuses on relay services. Thank you. Eliot, we'll go to the next slide. Oh, there it is. Eliot, are you able to join us? We can come back to this slide if Eliot's having a technical issue. Potentially we could go on to the next slide.
Okay, yeah, I did. You can get back to me. I mean, you can get me.
We can hear you now.
Yeah, okay, I think you could see me also.
Yeah, we see you now too. Okay.
Right. My apologies. We had I was having trouble finding the little icon for me so I can turn on the video and the audio. So anyway, I'm going to just talk about one area of telecommunications relay service, which is the area that a number of people in this audience use, which is Internet Protocol Captioned Telephone Service, and give you a few updates on what's happened in the past year. One issue we dealt with in the spring was as a result of the pandemic and the social distancing requirements associated with that, as well as some of the communications assistants have been unable to work for a variety of reasons, and also increased usage as a result of people having to isolate themselves and therefore made more reliance on telecommunications. We waived the speed of answer requirements for IPCTS and other relay services on March 16th. And that's been extended several times since then. And the most recent extension order was issued this morning, where we again extended that waiver through November 30th. Basically, we believe, from reports we've heard from providers, they have been able to improve the speed of answer since the initial waiver on March 16th. But they're still struggling to keep up as a result of the combination of the increased usage and some communications assistant availability issues. They have been able to hire more communications assistants, and they've also expanded the number of communications assistants who can work at home to help mitigate the problems that the providers have been facing. The other issue I'd like to address is use of automatic speech recognition with IPCTS. Back in 2018, the FCC issued a declaratory ruling permitting the use of automatic speech recognition without the assistance of communications assistants to provide IPCTS, but specific authority had to come after submitting an application, having it approved by the FCC. We received several applications for that. The first application we granted was on May 5th for Machine Genius, which provides IPCTS through a mobile phone app, and they now provide ASR only IPCTS. The second one was to Clarity on June 4th, and they are also doing the same thing, providing it on a mobile phone app and providing only ASR. We do have applications pending from InnoCaption and from VTC Secure. InnoCaption, a number of you are familiar with, they also provide IPCTS via mobile phone app, and they are providing CA-assisted IPCTS, and they have been beta testing use of ASR, and their proposal is to continue to offer both, to offer both CA-assisted and ASR only IPCTS. We've done a number of testing of ASR and have found the caption delay is much quicker. In other words, there's much less caption delay with use of automatic speech recognition than with CA-assisted IPCTS. And our testing has shown that the quality is, of course, is comparable between use of ASR and use of CA-assisted. And of course, the plan is to, that there will continue to be CA-assisted IPCTS. In fact, one of our objectives is to increase consumer choice. So if you are happy with your provider and happy with the service you use now, you may continue using it. But for those who would like to try ASR, you're of course now free to do so. And with that, I'll turn this back to Suzy to go on to the next slide about emergency access.
Thank you, Eliot. Next slide. Perfect. Thank you, Eliot. Okay, I'm going to try to move quickly so that we will have some time left to answer your questions. During this pandemic, I think that we have all realized the importance of having effective communications and notifications about emergencies. So I'll be focusing on two areas here, communications and notifications. The FCC does regulate those two areas. First, for calling 911, we do work with carriers to ensure that you're able to call 911. You have 4 different ways. You certainly the best way, I mean, I guess, is to use the way that you're accustomed to using and always have done. So if you always use relay services, then that may end up being the best way for you. It's not really necessarily the time during an emergency to try something new, but that is one option, is relay. There's also real-time text, which is another option. It's really not quite available yet, but it is something that probably all of you do have access to on your phones right now. You can go into your phone settings and activate your real-time text feature, and then you would be able to go back and forth between using voice and using text on the same phone call. Very different from texting, which is a completely separate platform from your voice call. Is more comparable to the way TTYs used to function, in which you were able to use TTYs over your same voice line, but now RTT is the new TTY because it's compatible with IP networks, which is really important that we transition away from TTYs, given that the analog system is going away. So real-time text gives us that option on your phone. And eventually the public safety answering points right now, at this point, the PSAPs are trying to deploy real-time text, but more importantly is the third feature that's available, which is text to 911 in general. It is technology neutral. It is inclusive of RTT, but most 911 call centers right now are using SMS technology or web browser-based technology, and they'll be able to get your text directly so you can communicate directly with them. And we require that if the PSAPs are unable to get your call via text, then there has to be a bounce back message that you receive if you send that message. And if you're not seeing that, please let us know. That's been required since 2012. And then the last method is TTY. Almost all PSAPs have TTYs because of some effort that was done by the DOJ, but 10 years ago now. And some of those 911 call centers reported to us that they have not used those TTYs in many years, that they have not received any TTY calls in potentially a decade sometimes. But it is still an option if you would rather use TTY. So those are those 4 options. If you have concerns about the accessibility of those things based on your attempts to use any of those means in the case of an emergency, please let us know. The second area is notifications. And you'll see we've got an emergency alerting system. That is the public nationwide system that will notify you of an emergency through television and radio, and will have a text crawl or will otherwise take over your screen with information visibly available there. And we have accessibility rules for those EAS text messages as well, and audio-based messages as well. You have to have both of those done at least once in their entirety, and the text crawl cannot overlap with the captioning. And it must be readable, you know, with font size, with speed, and so forth. So this year, we're not doing a national test of EAS. We typically have that annually in conjunction with FEMA. And emergency information on television, that is if and when the broadcast and cable operators decide to share emergency information, that information must be made accessible. The question becomes, what does that actually mean? It does not mean it has to be captioned. If it's emergency information, it means it has to be visually and audibly accessible to both people who are deaf and people who are of hearing, and people who are deaf, blind, and visually impaired folks as well. So we do have rules around that, and we release an annual reminder to industry to let them know the exact requirements for ensuring that emergency information on television is accessible. Now, again, that could be via text crawl, it could be via captioning, it could be via graphics, but it has to give you that information about the emergency visually. Okay. The final one is about wireless emergency alerts, and that is an emergency notification that goes out to your phone. We do require that the information is accessible there as well, and we have not heard a lot of complaints about the accessibility of that alert, but that is a voluntary effort by wireless providers. And if they do participate in WIA, they have to make sure that the messages are accessible. And since November of 2019, the FCC has also required that WIA messages must be preserved for 24 hours on your phone so that you have some more time to look at and review those messages. And with that, I will turn it back over to Diane, who is going to talk about resources and our complaint system. And then we'll close out the substantive areas that we wanted to talk about. So we'll go to the next slide, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm back on there. In order to leave some time for questions, I'll run through this pretty quickly. As you've heard, the FCC's Disability Rights Office is a resource for people who want to file complaints about a variety of accessibility issues. And online, you'll see there's a complaint form. We have the website listed on this slide. It's fcc.gov/accessibility complaints. And there we have people who work on our complaints team at DRO, and they can help you if you have a complaint about captioning issues or any of the other issues that were raised here today. So please reach out to us. That's one way that we can hear if there are problems out there, either specific problems or more general problems with compliance with our rules. There are other ways to get information about the Disability Rights Office. As we talked about before, there's a robust disability rights webpage at fcc.gov/accessibility. And there you can find information about a number of the topics that we discussed today, as well as a wealth of information about areas that we cover at DRO and that the FCC covers generally to help improve accessible communications. There's also several different ways to access the Disability Rights Office directly. Those numbers we went through before about the video phone access, the voice access as well, 202-418-2517. probably not ideal in this pandemic environment because we are all working remotely at the moment. So I would suggest an email to dro@fcc.gov might be a good way to try to get in touch if you'd like to get in touch with us. Of course, we will respond to any of these ways of reaching out. And lastly, there's accessinfo@fcc.gov, which Suzy had mentioned before, where we will provide regular updates on what the Disability Rights Office and the FCC generally is doing in this space. So plenty of ways to get in touch with us and to find out more about DRO. And with that, I'll turn over to the moderators, and thank you again for allowing us to speak on this panel.
Okay. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and start questions right now. The first question we have is, when will we see T captions improve? Everything I watch is pre-recorded. I cannot believe after all these years that tape programs are not 100% captioned correctly.
This is Diane. I think if you have an issue with particular programs not being captioned properly, if there are serious quality problems, then you might think about filing a complaint with the FCC so we could examine that in a little bit more detail. It's hard to say in the abstract because there are quality rules and guidelines as well as best practices that the industry is supposed to be following.
Okay, the next question we have is, we have issues with the news programming not providing effective communication, meaning no captioning during the emergencies like tornadoes. What can we do?
I'm happy to take that one. And certainly, Diane, I know it's a mix of captioning and emergency information. Diane, would you want to take first crack at it?
Sure. I think again that if it's emergency information, as Suzy said, that has critical details about emergency information have to be provided in a visual way. So if that is a problem, then again, that's something that we're happy to take a look at. Suzy, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I think you said it well, Diane. I do want to encourage you, if you do see something on TV that might not seem to be understandable, please also consider filming it a few seconds. That might be sufficient so that we can then see what you see if you do submit a complaint and reach out to us. We have our online complaint system that allows for attachments. You can attach that short video as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Next question is, getting captioning for news breaks info that are broadcasted off Facebook and not on TV. Columbia TV station that handles these live posts do not provide captions. What can I do? What sign language interpretation is provided?
Well, the FCC rules about clips are limited to a provider's own website or app, and they don't go to third-party websites. So that's not something that we currently regulate, if I'm understanding your question correctly.
Okay. All right. The next question is, what will allow smartphone captioning apps to be used for captioning webinars and other words not for phone calls?
Could you repeat that question? You said the captioning app on your phone for use with webinars?
Yes.
Webinars?
I think it's saying, I think it's related to the TRS capturing, I believe.
Eliot, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah. Yes, I could respond to that. The captioning that is compensable from the TRS fund that the FCC regulates would not be usable with a webinar, which is really a one-way voice direction. It's basically the TRS fund is really for providing captioning of telephone conversations and not is not to be used for other purposes. So if video is included in a conversation, that would be different, but it still has to be a two-way conversation. But on the other hand, I think if you had mentioned captioning apps, I know some of the smartphones now have apps on them that could provide their captioning as a free service, which has nothing to do with TRS. And if you can make and if you have a phone with an app that does that, then of course that's not something we regulate, but something that can be done.
Okay. Next question. Many TV ads are not captioned and make no sense without the audio. Will the FCC be mandating toward that TV ads be captioned?
There's currently TV ads are exempt from the captioning rules. So that's a reason why they're not universally captioned. And that's not something we regulate.
Let's see, we have maybe time for one more question. What percentage of 911 PSAPs have deployed text to 911 and RTT?
I'll take that one. I should also add that we do have a complete list of PSAPs that do have text to 911 capability. Yeah, on our website, and I believe that now the percentage is about there are about 6,100 PSAPs, and I think the percentage is maybe 20% of them currently have text to 911 capability, but that is changing rapidly. Maryland just announced that they are now text to 911 friendly, so that was just a few days ago. For RTT, real-time text, I am not sure because we are now in the process of launching a registry for RTT readiness for PSAPs, and that's not publicly available at this point. So we don't have that information confirmed yet, but my understanding is that PSAPs are diligently working on getting RTT available for you, given that the NG 911 will be incorporating that feature as well. So there are some PSAPs that are moving forward rapidly to NG 911 platforms also.
All right, thank you, Suzy. I thank the panel for their time on answering the questions today. For any questions that were not answered in today's presentation, our guests have graciously offered to address in a follow-up document that would be posted to the HRLA website along with the recording. I need to thank our guests for taking the time out of their busy schedules to present this wonderful and informative presentation today. We need to thank Deanna Baker for her amazing cart services. I need to also thank Jared Williams and Amy Cressup for their services as well. This webinar will be posted to the HRLA website at hearingloss.org. Please check hearingloss.org for future webinars and webinar recordings. I thank you for joining us today, and please stay safe, be well, and have a good day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I want to thank you as well, Carla. Thank you, and Lisa. This is Suzy speaking. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.